All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. So the topic of this webinar this week is building ETL processes in decisions. And Jessica Potter has put together a nice little demo that we'll be walking through today. I'll be running color commentary. Before I get started, a few housekeeping notes. So we have a number of events coming up, a couple training events. We have one in London, March 5th through the 7th. And information on that can be found on our website at decisions.com/events. You can sign up for any of these training events. We have one the following month in Lake Tahoe. And then 2 months later, we'll be back at our headquarters in Chesapeake, Virginia. We have a couple webinars coming up next month in March. The first one is Master Data Governance with SAP. One of our partners, Configurable Management, will be running that webinar. We'll be doing that together. And then later in the month, we have another webinar integrating with Salesforce. And again, all of these webinars can be found on our events page on our website. You can follow the link below. There are signups, and I'd highly encourage people to, from there you can sign up for all of our upcoming webinars, at least get them on the calendar for the ones that you'd be interested in. If you miss it, if you're interested and you do miss it, every one of our webinars are recorded, and within about 3 days, they're posted on our website. So if you happen to miss it, you can always come back and find the webinar on our website. Okay, in terms of an agenda today, I'll be talking just a little bit about ETL processes. Why would you use decisions for ETL? There's a lot of tools out there. Why would you use decisions? Then we have a bit of a contrived demo. We have a logistics company with 3 customers supplying data, and there's data quality issues with the data that we get, and we walk through the process of cleaning up that data in sort of an ETL process. Now, if at any point in the webinar you have a question, there's a little Q&A button at the bottom. We'll keep our eyes open for those questions, but just go ahead and type a question down there. We will either answer it during the course of the webinar, or we'll get to it at the end. All right, so what is an ETL process? So those of you that are here probably all know, extract, transform, load. A typical use case is usually around pulling data from various systems within a company and then putting them into a data warehouse. So, for example, my previous company was, I worked for a company, a private equity company that had purchased 18 different companies. They were all working in the clinical trial space. Now, every month, we'd have to download data from each of those companies into one data warehouse. And you wanted to know, for example, how much of your sales were to AstraZeneca. Now, the complexity here is that each of these companies, were independent entities, different systems, and in their databases, one was spelled AZ, one was spelled AstraZeneca, another AstraZeneca Inc. So you run into all kinds of issues when pulling data from various systems and then trying to put it in one location. And these are typical applications for ETL types of software applications. So, which leads us to the next slide here, why decisions for ETL. I was talking about my past history in my past life, and the person doing all that work was really a database administrator. And she was in a SQL Server, the SSIS application, which can obviously do all of those things. But the real benefit to decisions, just like in other areas of decisions, the real benefit is that the people familiar with the business can manage the rules themselves. They can manage the data cleanup rules. They can get notifications when data doesn't you have a new case where data doesn't match, they can go in. They're the ones that understand the data, and they can access the rules and clean it up so that next time when the data comes through, the rule will cover that use case. So really, this is powerful because, again, in my past life, when your IT people don't understand the data, they know how to write the SQL queries to clean it all up. But the business analyst or the people in the business, they know which structure of the data is the clean version, and they can write the rules to clean up the data in that regard. So what's going to happen today? We have a couple of examples I'll get to in a moment, but we're going to import some fake logistics shipping data that will include a number of things, a name, an address, a company name, a shipping distance, and then a shipping option. And it looks like this, and to concoct this, there's a website where, what's the name of that, Jessica? The one that gives you the fake data?
Macaroo.
Macaroo. So it's helpful to have data that you can test, when you're building things. So that all comes in handy. And you notice, there might be a zip code missing. People spell things different ways. This city is missing in this case, but we'll get to some of that. So our use case is we're a logistics company. We pick up shipments from 3 different customers of ours. They each give us, CSV or Excel files, and we need to put all that data together to go into to our system to send the packages out. Now, this kind of follows the same pattern that was discussed during our queuing webinar, where the data can come in, via database, via spreadsheet. For each record, we're going to do some work. We're going to run it through some flows. We're going to save it into a new data set that's cleaned. So we've got kind of dirty data coming in and clean data going out, and then we have some reports to analyze that data. And the last piece that will happen here is that we're going to kick off some assignments when new data comes in that we don't know what to do with. Again, so the data, in this case, we're importing it via a CSV file, but just as equally, that data could come in via a message bus using things like, RabbitMQ, via API calls, via the SDK, or that data could be pulled, using our steps within our flows. So here's the last slide before we jump into the demo itself, just to give you a bit of what we're going to walk through. So as I mentioned, we're the Agile Logistics Company. We're implementing a data warehouse, and here are some typical data quality issues that we run into. So first is, addresses are inconsistent, and addresses are usually a very key piece to ensuring you're not duplicating data. In this case, we're including some logic to run through some API calls out to the USPS. Additionally, in decisions, we have connections between the Google Maps addressing APIs. So if you wanted to learn how to use either of these, please get in touch with us. Then we have another example, people typing in addresses. Some type out the full state name, some put in the 2-letter abbreviation. We want to standardize all that, and we're going to use a truth table in the example here. Then we want to also insert a shipping cost, and here's an example where we in addition to cleaning data, we have some business logic that we want to apply to that data, attach a shipping cost based on some logistics rules that we have. And the first 2 examples are a little more complicated. We're going to walk through how they're done. This 3rd example, we're going to build a matrix rule to do that shipping cost calculation and include it into then the data flow. And then finally, another common use case is where you have inconsistent company names. So again, from my past, I worked in the pharmaceutical space. We had one customer that was quintiles. They were spelled 17 different ways within our data systems. We had another, customer, for example, AstraZeneca, that was spelled 24 different ways. One might be AZ Inc., AstraZeneca. I mean, you name it, there was all kinds of different spellings. And then to do roll-up reports, you want all of that to be consistent. So Jessica will walk through the use of a rule set. She'll build some quick statement rules to correct some of these company names, such that in the future, when additional data comes in, you have all of these rules set up to clean these things up such that the data going into your data warehouse is clean, and we can kick off exceptions or an assignment to a person in the business team to clean that up. So we're trying to show different experiences with different rule editors. If you were building all this out, for your specific application, you may do it slightly differently. You may not use the exact method we've shown here, but we're trying to show, a few different ways to do things using our different tools. So with that said, I, at this point, will turn it over to Jessica to walk us through the demo itself. So she's going to first run through kind of a load in of a batch, run it through the rules. She'll walk through a little bit of what's happening. Maybe we can jump over into the build side to show how it was put together. And then she'll do the actual build out of these last two items. All right, Jessica.
Thank you, Gordon. And hello, everyone on the call today. I am Jessica Potter. I'm one of the sales engineers here with Decisions. And I know me and Gordon are both excited to take everyone through this ETL process that we built using the Decisions platform. Now, a couple of things that I'll mention before we jump into the process. I know Gordon has already explained the use case in which we'll be seeing, but I just want to also point out we're going to end up seeing this from two different user perspectives. So we're actually going to have a supervisor role that will come in and actually kick off the process of handling a new batch of data. Now, after that supervisor kicks off that batch, we will actually jump over to the shipping administrator role. And the shipping administrator is going to be responsible for completing any assignments that gets created throughout that process. And when assignments are getting generated, that just means that the shipping administrator needs to perform a little bit of manual review or maybe some manual data entry to ensure that we are transforming all of that dirty data into a nice cleansed data set before you send it to your data warehouse or maybe to another system. All right, so with that being said, before I kick off the process, I want to show you the two different files that we will be sending through. So I'm just going to pull up this first CSV. This is for company A. And the reason I pull up this CSV is I want to point out that company A is sending in their data in a certain order. So here we have state, street address, company name, contact name, so on. But for company B, the second set of information or the second set of data that we'll be sending through this process, I'll go ahead and switch over to that CSV file. You'll notice that the order that they have their CSV formatted is different than company A. So here we have company first, contact name, email, and that's something that's very common. That's one of the reasons why you'll need an ETL process is you're never going to get data from different companies or different systems in the same format. So Decisions makes it really easy for you to handle different sets of data that are coming in, not only from different sources, but in different formats. All right, so now that we've taken a look at these files, let's actually run these files through our process. And I will come back and explain this dashboard in just a little bit, but what I want to do is go ahead and run those files through. So I'm just going to navigate to my process new batch tile, and this is actually actionable. So I can click process new batch, and here I can upload those CSV files that I've just shown you. Now it's also important to note here that for our demonstration, we are using CSV files, but this data or this information can very easily be coming from separate sources. So maybe you have a vendor that sends in a CSV, or maybe you have a vendor that sends in Excel, and maybe you're grabbing this information from an existing database, or as Gordon mentioned, this data might be coming from a message queue. So Decisions is really flexible in where this data is coming from. Let me just double check, make sure I added the right files here. But Decisions is very flexible in where the data comes from and how we can transform that. So let me go back and add company B. All right, so I'll go ahead and submit these files. And we can see that the files are being processed, and to navigate to the dashboard for further information. And what we can see here on the dashboard, I'll go ahead and refresh this, is after we've run those items through, and it looks like I actually uploaded the same files twice, but that's okay. We can still go in and handle that. But what you'll see on the dashboard is, I'll explain some of the KPIs. So here we have current assignments. So this is just letting our supervisor know how many assignments or how many manual data entries or manual data reviews are going to be required before this particular batch is ready to be sent to its next location or to be processed by the next part in your process. And this KPI will actually update and change and show you the current assignments for each individual run. So if I actually change my batch, you'll notice that KPI is going to update and change. Now the next key performance indicator we have here is just showing me how many items were processed in each batch. So we can see this particular run only had 25 different items that we were processing. So I'll go ahead and switch back to the batch that we just ran, and we can see we're actually running 150 items this time. Now, the last thing that I'll point out for the KPIs, and we'll jump into the reports, is we're showing the average fee per shipment. So this is just some good insight for that supervisor to be able to give a quick glance and see what's going on with the process. Now, the reports that we have, I'll just talk about that very quickly. On the left-hand side, we have a report that's showing all of the different batch runs. Next to that, we have our input data report, and this is showing us how the data came into the system. So this is kind of the report of the dirty data on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, this is showing us all of the data after it's been through our rules and our workflow. So here you can see without having to do any manual data entry yet, we were able to automate a couple of things. So I'll just point out a couple of those things here. The very first line item for our dirty data report, we can see we're actually missing a zip code here. And what we're doing in the background or the back end, and I'll show you guys in just a few minutes, is we are utilizing steps from our USPS module. So here we're able to actually send in the city and address, and United States Postal Service will return that zip code to us. So here you can see we've populated that zip code. I'll jump back to the dirty report or the middle report, and we can see in this particular line item 5, we are missing the city, but we do have that state and zip code. So if we go back over to our clean data report or our output data, you can see for line item 5, we're using very similar steps, but it's still that USPS module to populate that city for us. Now, one thing I will mention about the module is I keep mentioning it's part of a module, but it's completely free. So we do offer quite a few different modules or built-in integrations and decisions, and those all live under your system admin features. So if you go there, you'll see a list of quite a few built-in integrations we have. They're all completely free. You just have to enable them. And once you enable them, it will actually extend either your settings or steps in your steps toolbox. All right, so a couple other things that I'll point out. It's very apparent that all of this text is now in uppercase format. So maybe for your organization, it's important that you keep all of your data in a very standardized format. So maybe for you or for this organization, having it in that uppercase formatting is important. So we've actually just gone ahead and converted all of this text to be uppercase, uppercase. All right, a couple other things I'll point out. We have Or you may be wondering what these red bubbles or red highlighted lines are. This is just a color rule, and what this particular color rule is doing is it's letting the supervisor know exactly which line items have assignments tied to them. So anywhere where I see this red bubble or this line, that just means that my shipping administrator has to actually go in and update that information before it's ready to be sent to the next part of the process or another system. So with that being said, let's actually jump over to the shipping administrator dashboard. So I'm going to switch roles here. And now I'm actually going to work this as that shipping administrator. So I'll go in, I have this dashboard. The shipping administrator also has a few KPIs across the top, so I can see how many current assignments I have. The average completion time on my assignments, apparently I've been keeping up with my work very well here. I have 0 minutes as my average completion time, so I've been completing it within seconds. We'll move on, and again, they just have the average fee per shipment. We will talk about these buttons here in just a moment. I will come back to those, but what I want to talk about first is this report. This is just showing me all of my assignments that are currently assigned to me. And then to the right-hand side of that, I actually just have a preview or a form that I can interact with that's showing me that data. So if I actually selected another line item, you'll notice it's going to fill it in with the details pertaining to the item selected. So I'll go in and I'll actually work these assignments from the report itself. So our reports are actionable. I can right click here, and I'm just going to have that same view that I have on the dashboard as well. Now we can see that California is spelled wrong here. So that's one of the reasons why this assignment was getting generated. Another reason that this assignment was getting generated is because it was not able to turn California into the abbreviated version. So you may have noticed on the previous dashboard, all of the states came in with the full state name. But on the right-hand side, when we had the transform data, all of the states were actually abbreviated. So because this was spelled wrong, our rule currently as it is not able to pick up on that. But that's okay. We're going to fix that. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this to CA. I'll hit submit. And we'll just work the rest of these tasks here. Make sure we have clean data. This one is also CA. As I mentioned before, I submitted multiple files, so we'll probably see some multiple assignments here, but that's okay. Submit that, and I'll go ahead and work these as well. So here we can see Colorado was actually spelled wrong, Colorado. So I'll go ahead and change that to CO. Submit. I'll do it one more time here. Let's submit. And something you may have been noticing in the background is as I'm completing these assignments, they're actually dropping off of my report or dropping off of my queue in real time. So this is a great way to be able to keep up with my tasks as I work them. I don't have to worry about looking at a report and thinking, oh wait, did I complete that? I'll know I completed it because it's actually will drop off the queue. So I'll go ahead and change this one to CA. Let's submit. And now all of my assignments have been worked. Now, as a shipping administrator, because I'm the one who's coming in here and doing this manual data entry or manual data review, I want to make sure I'm not going to have to do that same work in the future. So the truth table that we have that's actually converting the state to the abbreviated form, let's go in and update that so that if anyone else sends in California or Colorado spelt that way, Decisions can handle it. So when I click that tile, this is actually going to take me right into the designer editing view. So I can see exactly how this truth table is laid out now. And for those of you who are not familiar with truth tables, this just allows us to define a condition here across the top, as well as multiple rows of data to evaluate against. So here we're just passing in the state name that came from the file, and we're going to compare it against each one of these state names. If it equals California, it'll output CA. And again, because California was spelled wrong, that is why it was not able to transform that data. But the reason that we added that button right there to the dashboard for the shipping administrator is so that they can make these changes very quickly and have them implemented immediately. So I can go in here, I'll type in California, I'll actually spell it the way that it was spelled on the form. I think that's how it was spelled. We'll put CA as the output, and we'll also have to include another line for Colorado. There we go. And luckily, I'm a terrible speller, so spelling these wrong feels natural. It's okay. All right, so one other thing that I'll point out here in this truth table is here, the way that we're doing it, we're just manually adding a new line to handle the different spellings. But I want to point out that over time, this list might become unmanageable. There might be a lot of different rows or way too many rows to handle. So one way that I can kind of cut down on that or make it a little bit more manageable is rather than having my condition as state name equals, I can actually make this state name, maybe we'll look at a list rule, is in list. And that would allow me to define multiple strings to check against for each one of these rows. So that's just going to make the truth table a little bit more manageable. But we'll go ahead and save these changes. And in a couple of minutes after we look at the backend and make some changes, we're going to run that file through again, and we'll see how these changes are going to eliminate those assignments. So I'll go ahead and save this. We'll close out of here. And now I'm just back at the shipping administrator dashboard. So before we jump into the backend, I very quickly want to go back to the supervisor dashboard and point out one last thing here. So the last time we were on this view as the supervisor, we had that report that had the red bubbles or the lines that had assignments tied to them. So now that my shipping administrator has completed those assignments and has fixed that data, you'll notice that those red bubbles or that color rule went away. And also, you'll notice that the new information that was typed in is actually provided here now. So it's updated my report as well. So now that my data has been cleansed or has gone through that ETL process, I can download this information to maybe send to another system. Now again, here we are just downloading an Excel file or CSV file. But this same action could very easily be sending this information to a message queue or maybe sending this data to another system. It doesn't have to be these files that we're using, but it shows well to be able to just open up a file and show you the data in it. Now, one thing that I'll point out here is not only do we have our information updated, we've cleansed all that dirty data, but now we actually have all 150 items in one file now, one list. They're not in separate systems. So now they're all in the same order, they're in the same format, and I know I have accurate information. Now currently, as it is, you can see that the price is at $0. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to build a matrix rule or finish building a matrix rule that is going to look at the shipping options, so whether it's 2-day standard or overnight, how long the shipping distance is, as well as the weight, and determine what that price is going to be. So this is another way that you can add a little bit of logic to your ETL process. So not only can you transform data and validate data, but you can also add additional pieces of information as well. So let's jump into the back end and let's walk through the flow, and then we'll build that matrix rule. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the studio side. And I'm going to open up my ETL webinar folder. And I'll go ahead and open up this main flow. Now here you can see this is the flow that was actually kicked off when I clicked that process new batch tile. So here is the form where we actually uploaded those files. But what I want to talk about is this format shipping files subflow. So when I open it up here, you can see what we're doing is we're actually branching our flow into two different paths, and we're reformatting the data that was given to us. So if you remember, Company A and Company B sent their CSV files in with the information in different rows. So the way that we're actually handling that in decisions is we created one structure called shipping details It's just a data structure that we created in Decisions, so that now we can come in here, we can go to our visual mapping editor. So let me open up this flow. We can go into our visual mapping editor, and I can choose exactly which fields I want to go, or which values I want from each field to go to our database, or where exactly I want them stored in the table. Or maybe if I'm not even storing it off at this exact moment, I'm still putting the information or the data in an organized structure. Now with the visual mapping editor, you can see it's really easy to say, okay, field 1, if you guys remember, was for state. So I can simply just drag the value that's in field 1 over to state. And as you can see, we did this for all of the different fields on that CSV file. We'll go ahead and close out of here. And after we get it in the organized format that we're looking for, we're just going to begin building a list of those items. So we'll close out of here and we'll just take a peek into company B. So when I open this up, you can see it's the same flow. It's the same steps. All we're doing again is we're just organizing that data in a way that we want to work with it. So when I open up the mapping editor this time, you can see because those fields were in different spots that we're now mapping field 1 to our company name. But what's great here is you'll notice this is the same structure. This is just the shipping detail structure. So now we're able to take data in 2 separate formats and put it in one organized structure. So I'll go ahead and close out of here. And we all know businesses grow. So let's say maybe I have company 3 or company C who now wants to submit some shipping information as well. But maybe they don't come, their information isn't coming from a CSV. Maybe their information is coming from a database. All I would have to do, I would just create another path here. If it is coming from a database, maybe I'll just use fetch entities just to kind of simulate that. But maybe I'm fetching all of these entities from their database. And then again, I can just use that mapping editor. And I can just very easily put it in the format that I want. So with this list mapping step, all you have to do is go into that show item mapper, and I haven't chosen the output type here, but if I choose the shipping details, which is that structure that we created, I'll go into here. And let me pick a type real quick. So maybe their structure shipping details as well. But when I go into the show item mapping editor, again, all I have to do is expose all of those properties, and now I can pick exactly where in my flow our entity results. I can pick and choose exactly which fields I want to map to the fields in my shipping data structure. So it's very easy to scale this system. It's very easy to add additional companies. We'll go ahead and close these for now, and we'll hop out of this flow. And after we've formatted all of those shipping files and we've combined them into one big list, what we're going to do now is loop through each one of those items on the list to check for that city and state. So I'll just open up the Subflow, and I just have a very simple truth table that's saying, or that's checking to see if the city or the zip code is missing. If the city's missing, we're going to output a message that says city missing. If the zip code's missing, we're going to output a message that says zip is missing. And if the city and the state are both, or I'm sorry, the city and the zip code are both missing, we're going to output an error. So with the error, we can have that shipping administrator go in and actually manually enter that information or figure out what that information might be. So if the zip code is missing, so we're checking that result that's coming out of the truth table. If that zip code is missing, we're actually going to go ahead and run this flow. And when I open up this flow, it's a very simple flow. This is one of the steps that I was talking about for the USPS module. So here I can just pass in address information, so things like the address, the city, and the state. And the US or the United States Postal Service is going to return that zip code to me. And after I get that zip code, of course, I'm going to want to update my shipping details or update my database with that information. Go ahead and close out of here. And it's going to be a very similar thing. If the city's missing, I'll go ahead and open up that flow. This time, we're just getting the city by the zip code. So all we have to do is pass in the zip code here, and it's going to return to us the city. And again, just updating that information. And again, if that error is thrown, we're just going to assign a task to the shipping administrator to go in and manually review or manually enter that information. I'll close out of here. And something that I'll just very quickly show you is, I'm not going to go into this change state to abbreviation subflow, but here we're just using converter flows to actually format all of the text into uppercase. Oh, I lied. That's actually this flow here that I just clicked. So we will open up this change state to abbreviation. And here's the truth table that we were actually editing earlier. So when I opened up that truth table from that shipping administrator's dashboard, this is the rule that I was editing. So what's great is if I scroll down, my changes are now there. So right there from that dashboard, when I made that change and I hit save, it's already updated it in my flow. I just have to update it in one place, and anywhere where I'm using this truth table is going to automatically update. I'll go ahead and close out of here. And then the last thing that I'll talk about is, I'll just open this up, is here, we're just going to go ahead and after we assign error codes to individual records, we're just going to fetch the shipping details with the error codes. And for each item that has an error code, we're just going to create an assignment. So we're going to have that user come in, review that information. Once they've reviewed it or once they've entered data, again, we're just going to update the database. So I'll close out of here and let's get to actually adding that matrix rule. So let's add a matrix rule here. And I mentioned before, I actually already started on it just to give us a little bit more time here today. So I'll say, I want to call this our pricing table, hit add, but we are going to add a little bit of changes just so you get a feel for our matrix rule as well. I'm just going to go into my pricing table, I'll hit pick. And with our matrix rule selected, let's go ahead and open that up and take a look at what's already built and make some changes. So I'll go ahead and hit edit matrix rule. And currently the way that this matrix rule is set up is we are looking at the distance as well as the shipping option to output the result of the how much that shipping is going to cost or the price on that shipping. Now, what you'll notice with the matrix rule is it probably reminds you of an Excel layout where we have columns and rows, and matrix rules are really easy to read. So it's going to be the intersection of these conditions defined on the top and defined on the left-hand side here. It's going to be the intersection of those conditions that's going to output the result of this rule. So for instance, if I was shipping something that was in between 0 and 1,000 miles, so maybe it's 500 miles, and I'm using standard shipping option, my price would be $10. So again, it's just the intersection of these conditions. Now, what makes the matrix rule so nice is it's really easy to edit these or update them and maintain them. It's also easy to add additional logic or more complex logic. So for instance, let's say our company now wants to actually look at all of the shipments that are overnight. And if it is an overnight shipment, we want to look at the weight. And if it falls within a certain range, we're actually going to charge a different price. So to add that in, I'm just going to click this plus button here. And I will find the rule that I want to use. And I'm actually going to look for a number ranges rule. And I will name this shipping weight. Hit add. And then now I'm just being prompted to set up a few settings for this rule. So the first being, what are the number ranges? So I'll add one just to keep it short here. And we'll name this maybe a light shipment, maybe. We'll do low value as 0 pounds, and we'll say maybe the high value is 45 pounds. We'll hit OK. And that's actually the only number range that I'm going to specify. We know we're not going to have numbers coming in that are negative. We're not going to have a negative shipping weight. So anything that's over 45, I'm actually just going to put in this not in range category. So now that I've actually specified what I want my different ranges to be, or the two in this case, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the value that I want to run through those ranges. And we know we're going to be looking at the shipping weight. So I'll go to select from flow, and I have my shipping details data structure defined here. So I'm just passing in this data structure as an input to the rule. So I'll open this up and I'm going to find my shipping weight or weight. I'll hit done and close. And that's all I needed to do to actually build the condition that's going to be evaluating. Now, the next thing that I'll do here is I'll just fill in some values. But what you'll notice is if that shipping option comes in and it's overnight, it's also going to run this rule that I've nested within it. So now I have even more options for results that I can output. So as you can see, this matrix rule can be really dense on for results as well as conditions you can define. But I'll stop talking and I will try and get some values added here. I am not a shipping expert. These prices may not be accurate. I'll just keep it simple here. And maybe if it's not in range, maybe we'll always do 200. And I know $200 seems a little bit unreasonable for overnight shipping for something that's 50 pounds, but that's okay. All right, so now that I have my additional logic added, before I actually go run this in a flow or test it in the flow, it's always a good idea to test any changes you make in our debugger. So I'll open up our debugger. And this is great for being able to test in the same visual paradigm that you're designing. We offer this debugger on our flows and our rules. So here, I'm just going to define some sample data as an input. Of course, I could create unit test if I wanted to, so I don't have to define this sample data every time. But I don't have a unit test yet, so let's go ahead and just add some data in here. Maybe the distance that we're going for this shipment, let's say 1,500. Maybe the shipping option is overnight. And we'll say the weight is 65 pounds. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. I know I should be expecting an output of 200, but we'll see what happens when I hit run. There we go, yep. And we can see because the distance fell between 1,000 and 2,000, because it was overnight, and because it was over that 45-pound limit that I set in the range, that ultimately here we're going to be outputting $200 as the price. Now I'll go ahead and close out. And now that we have built new logic and now that we've tested it, let's incorporate it into our ETL process. So the last thing that I'm going to do, well, not the last thing, but the last step that I'll add is I need a way to update that information in my database. So I want a way to add that price to my shipping details. So I'm just going to go to my user-defined types here I have in my steps toolbox. This is where any steps relating to a data structure that you create in decisions are going to live. So I'm just going to go to my database structures. I'll open up shipping details because, as I mentioned before, that's just a structure that I created in decisions. And I will choose selective update. And the reason I'm choosing selective update is I'm only updating one field, so I don't need to update the entire record here. So I get to select which fields I want to update. And once that update has been made, we will want to go back to the next item in the list. So what you're seeing here is we have some red exclamations, and these are just validation warnings. So this is letting me know that I'm missing some input information here. So we can see my primary key ID field cannot be left empty, and I have no mapping set for shipping details. So let's go clear up some of those validations. So when I go to my matrix rule, I have to map where those shipping details are coming from. And we want to pass in each item in this loop. So if I look at the outputs that I'm passing out here, we can see the data name is item. So I'm going to be looking for item to pass in. So I'll go to my select from flow, and I'll just simply select item. All right, great. So now we're passing data in. So now let's look at the output of this matrix rule. And we can see the data name now is result. So let's actually change that to pricing, maybe pricing result. There we go. And now I'm going to want to pass in this result to my selective update step. And I'm going to want to pass it into my price field. So I'm going to find price. I'll do select from flow. And we're just going to pick pricing result. So again, that's just that value that's coming from the matrix rule. And then the last thing is our primary key. So I need to select some sort of identifier so it knows which record to update. So I'll go down to my inputs. I'll say select from flow. And where that ID is actually being generated is on this create shipping detail. So anytime it creates a record, it's going to output that ID for me, this entity ID. So this is what I'm going to be looking for to pass in as my primary key. Oops, so I'll go to select from flow and we will choose entity ID. All right, great. So now we've added some logic here. Let's jump into the debugger and let's see how this new logic will work. So now when I hit play, same thing that you saw when I was on the dashboard view. I'm just adding files that I want to run through. There we go. We'll hit OK. We'll submit it. And what's really cool about the debugger is you can actually see each step executing. You can see that we had 75 different records between those two files. So it's actually looped through here, and all of these different steps have executed 75 times. Now these particular steps have only executed once. But another really cool feature with the debugger, if you're not familiar with it, is the fact that you can click on any one of these steps and you can view the input and the output data. And more specifically, you can see it for each execution. So if I want to see my inputs and my outputs on execution 1, I just select it and I say view input output data. So I can see here's all the shipping details that I passed into my matrix rule. And then if I scroll down and look at the outputs, I can see the result of that particular execution passed out $30 as the price. All right, fantastic. So we know it's working. So let's jump over and back into our dashboard. And from the supervisor dashboard, let's go ahead and run those files one more time. And what we should see is that no assignments are going to get generated for that batch because we updated our truth table. And now when I download the CSV or that Excel file, we should also have a shipping price included. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So again, I'm just uploading these same files, company A and company B. Hit submit. All right, great. So I click on this batch that I just ran. We can see 75 items have been processed. There's no current assignments tied to it. So if I look over here, I shouldn't have any red bubbles, red lines, which I don't. I can see the average fee per shipment has gone up a little bit. But really when I come over here, I can see I'm not missing any data. All my data is in a very standardized format. And then additionally, now I should have that shipping price. So when I click download CSV and I look at that file, this time when I open it up, here is the price. So it's not only calculated that price for me, but it's also updated my records with it. So very quickly, we were able to actually enforce quite a few changes here that have really changed the outcome of our process. So the last thing that I want to do is just very quickly talk about rule sets. So Gordon had mentioned earlier that when you're dealing with a lot of company names, you'll notice that it can be spelled quite a few different ways, or maybe some people, if they have incorporated, will type out incorporated. Some people might type in INC period. You'll get a variation of how different company names are spelled. So we're going to look at a rule set and see a couple different ways that you'll be able to handle some of that data cleansing. So what I'm going to do is I'm back on my shipping administrator dashboard where I have the option to edit these specific rules that I've tied to these tiles here. We've already seen the update state table. When I hit edit matrix rule, this will actually take us to our pricing table. So maybe something drastic happened and gas has gone up. Maybe gas is twice the amount. It'd be important for us to quickly come in here and update some of these prices to keep up with that change. So right from the dashboard, that shipping administrator can click update matrix or edit matrix rule and can update those values. So let's go ahead and do that for the edit rule set. So when I open this up, this is going to take us to our rule set. And for those of you who are not familiar with rule sets are just a group of rules with order and dependency. And with rule sets, you actually can define multiple types or multiple styles of rules in here. So you can have statement rules, truth tables, matrix rules, even flows, all a part of one rule set. And with the rule set, you define input data on the rule set itself. And every time that rule set is called, every single rule in this folder is going to run with that common input data. So let's take a look at some of the rules that we have in here, and we're actually going to build one as well. So I'm going to open up this fix dev bug rule. So here we can see if maybe the company name comes in with dev bug with an extra G, maybe what we want to do here is we actually want to kick off an assignment. So here we're actually not outputting any data. We're actually kicking off an assignment. And this is our escalated assignment flow. And this flow lives inside of the rule set. So if I close out of here, this is our escalated assignment flow that's actually going to be kicked off. And if I open this up, you can see all it's doing is it's just going to create a task for that shipping administrator to come in there and review. And maybe they select the company name from a drop-down, or maybe they have a text box where they can type in some free text. It's really up to how your organization needs to handle this. Maybe we'll open up one other rule and then we will actually build our own rule. So this next rule is called fix Tazzy. So the company's name is Tazzy, or some people might send it in as Tazzy LLC. So what we're doing with this particular rule is we're saying if the company name comes in and it equals Tazzy, we actually want to output it, or I'm sorry, if the company name comes in and it's equal to Tazzy LLC, we want to output it to Tazzy. We just want to change it so that we have a consistent name across the board. Doesn't matter if it comes in as Tazzy LLC or just Tazzy, we always want it to be Tazzy. So go ahead and close out of here. And what I want to do is I want to build a rule that's going to handle some of the different ways I've seen decisions spelled, or some of the different names I've seen decisions called. So I'm just going to add a rule. I'll add an evaluation rule, and we'll say this is our decisions example. Hit create rule. And I want to make this rule a little bit more complex. I want to add an either or condition here. So what I'm going to do is, rather than actually configuring this first if condition, I'm just going to go down to add, and I'm going to add an either or group. And I'll go ahead and remove this condition at the top. So I'm going to say if the company name equals, we'll say decisions.com. We'll say, or if the company name equals decisions software. And I'll just add one more here, one more or if the company name equals decisions LLC. And these are all common names that I've actually seen. Customers, send their information to us. Maybe this is how they refer to us on the contract, and maybe in an email. But maybe what we want is if any of these evaluate true. So if it comes in as decisions.com, decision software, decisions LLC, we actually just want to, across the board, just make that decisions. So now I can define the output data here. So now I'm saying, again, if that company name matches any of these, let's go ahead and just output decisions as a result here, and we will update the database with this record. So I'll go ahead and hit save. We'll close out of here. And I see we're coming up on the time here. So I just want to leave enough time for anybody who has questions. So again, if you have any questions, just post it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, or you can post it right in chat. And I'll just stay on the line for a couple minutes here for any questions that might come in. All right, and it looks like we don't have any questions today. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us on this webinar, whether it be live or you're watching it back on the website. So thank you again for everyone. I know that this was a very simple use case or a simple example that might not directly work for your organization, but I hope you can take some of these concepts that we've covered today and implement them in any of your ETL processes. Now, just a couple of notes before I sign off here is don't forget to check out our documentation website. That is documentation.decisions.com. We have a lot of great content on there. And then additionally, I'll mention we do have a page on our website dedicated to recordings like webinars or training videos. So I'll just quickly bring you to that site. If I can type. And at decisions.com/videos, we have quite a few videos, some training videos, like I mentioned, as well as other webinars. So I encourage you guys to go check out our resources. If you have any questions, reach out to either sales@decisions.com if you have any sales-related questions, or if you have any support-related questions, feel free to reach out to support@decisions.com. We are always there to help you guys. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.